Hello and welcome to part 2.
Today our subject is self-expression through language. In other words, writing.
So in the previous video, we talked about the vomit pass. The vomit pass is this idea that when you sit down to write something, you just let go. You just start typing. You stop listening to that voice that says, "Oh, this sucks." And you start listening to the words and the ideas that are coming from your own brain. So a lot of times we don't like to do that. Our brains in real time try to edit what we say and why we say it. So that way it has an impact or a perceived impact.
We think all the tools we have for making sense of our friends betray us when we talk to strangers. So we're really good. If I know you really well, I have a whole series of strategies I use to kind of understand you, decode your behavior.
Unconsciously.
Unconsciously and consciously.
Okay.
But then if I transfer those same strategies to someone who's a stranger, you go off in all kinds of weird and random directions, and you end up making all kinds of grave mistakes. The word, the technical word for that is that person is mismatched. The guy in the audience like this, who's having a great time, is mismatched. And we have trouble with people who are mismatched. Friends is deeply misleading. So the thing about
They
the
weren't
great
friends?
paradox of Friends is, if you try and describe the plot of an episode, it's like impossible. But no one has ever watched an episode of Friends that at the end said, they lost me. The question is, why, what's this, how do you explain this paradox? And the explanation is that everyone on Friends is perfectly matched. So when Phoebe is surprised, her jaw drops, her eyes go wide, and her eyebrows go up. When Ross is perplexed, as he often is, he looks exactly like a perplexed person is supposed to look.
Our fear or misperception takes us out of where we are supposed to be when we write or when we talk to someone. This causes us to stumble over our words and stops us from actually engaging in the subject. In other words, your fear gets in the way, or your anxiety gets in the way of being present and in the space that you are creating. We end up blinding ourselves to the paradise that is all around us when we engage in our writing. It reminds me of in C.S. Lewis's The Last Battle. The dwarves are in Aslan's country, which is considered the great place, the ending place of all things, in celebration. But the dwarves that are there believe themselves to be in a type of hell. They are too blinded to recognize the beauty and goodness in the space that they're in, and all they can do is be critical of the food and of the smells and of the place, and never engage in something that is enjoying what is happening and partaking in the beauty of the space. In this class, we're going to write drafts, multiple drafts, and have people look at them, actually look at them, not tell you how your grammar is, but actually engage in content. This is hard and scary if it's not done properly, and we're going to train you how to do that. Part of that training is getting you into the habits of simply writing. It sounds very easy, write something, but it's actually very hard when you allow your critic to be the one in the driver's seat, especially right now. What would be considered a first draft or a vomit pass draft. This idea of the open and closed mode doesn't necessarily come from me. It actually comes from John Cleese, who in his research, it comes from other people. But basically the idea is this.
Creativity is not possible in the closed mode. By the closed mode, I mean the mode that we are in most of the time when we're at work. We have inside us a feeling that there's lots to be done, and we have to get on with it if we're going to get through it all. It's an active, probably slightly anxious mode, although the anxiety can be exciting and pleasurable. It's a mode in which we're probably a little impatient, if only with ourselves. It has a little tension in it, not much humor. It's a mode in which we're very purposeful, and it's a mode in which we can get very stressed and even a bit manic, but not creative.
It's hard to be creative when you're sitting there judging yourself or telling yourself that this is not a good idea. Or if you just wrote like this person or said this thing, maybe it'd be better. You have to remind yourself over and over again, especially if it's a first draft, that you are exploring, you're learning, you're growing, creating. The words that you type in your papers are the very first time that those words will ever be put together in the unique way that you do. You have a style and you have a voice, and that is something very important. That is what gives you the space to create an argument, space to create an analysis. When all you do is tell yourself, if I have to sound like this person, or if I have to do this thing, or you're telling yourself this thing that is imposed in your mind. And it's when you let that go and you allow yourself to have a first draft, expand upon the idea. This is not an outline, by the way. This is a fully fledged idea, but it's pursuing things within the idea. It's allowing yourself to say, I'm going to write about a particular issue that I'm passionate about and argue for it. The how and understanding that comes from the exploratory vomit pass draft. And that's your first draft. But your second draft, we've taken in the information and we're now going through each individual thing and wondering, how do we make this one line better? How can I improve this idea? How can I make this exactly as it should be? There is no need to add another idea. Once we have entered into closed mode, we now establish there is only one idea, and that idea is what we're going to focus on. And then after we've made everything exactly as we believe it should be, making sure that the grammar is really good, the points laid out are clear and concise, and that all superfluous language is tightened, so that way it's almost like a fine point, making sure that it's engaging and full of life and good. All of this comes from the closed mode when you're finally done exploring and wanting to tighten everything and bolt everything down and make sure that everything is exactly in the place that it should be. Then we start to go into adding more ideas. And when we're doing that, that's the open mode. But every time, it's a dance between receiving something, the open mode, and examining it alone, the closed mode.